exquisite layers, expertly applied ganache, no soggy bottom. When I spend hours on a beautifully baked, perfectly frosted cake, I'm making sure the entire world can see it. But the algorithm giveth, and it taketh away. Yesterday's culinary triumph, a bomb tuna casserole, flopped hard with the gram, but everyone went nuts over the cronut I made last week. Maybe it's the hour I post at, or the day of the week. Somewhere in there is a relationship between things. Mark Zuckerberg has solved the riddle, but so can we, because stats gives us the recipe to figure it out. I'm Sabrina Cruz, and this is Study Hall, Real World Statistics. Whether you're trying to bump up the views on your bake-off-worthy cake photos, or something like planting different types of trees to boost wildlife diversity, understanding how different kinds of variables can impact things is important. Like, we might want to explore how the number of likes on a photo changes depending on the day of the week, or how the number of bird species shifts based on the type of tree we plant. Things like day of the week or type of tree aren't numbers, they're categories of data, and statistics helps us test when a number, like however many bird species, is different depending on what category it's related to, like the type of tree that gets planted. It can even pull it off if we're not sure what the exact relationship looks like. Take food blogger Seasonal Susan, a frenemy of mine. I haven't really gotten over the time she said I should stick to stats instead of souffle, but now she needs help. Stats help. Must be nice to have your cake and eat it too. Basically, when Seasonal Susan's post gets lots of engagement, she gets commissions and catering gigs that keep her rolling in the dough. But she's noticed some weird trends. Last month's tiramisu photo did really well, while this week's zuppa inglese barely got any hype, and even I can admit her layering was perfect. It's been a similar story with her spelt noodles skyrocketing in popularity, even though the equally gorgeous quinoa pasta had pretty so-so reception. Seasonal Susan suspects that the day of the week she posts is connected to how much attention it gets. Where there's a hunch, there's a hypothesis, and that is where I come in. But to pin down what kind of statistical test to use, I need a closer look at the data. The outcome Seasonal Susan is interested in, the dependent variable of her hypothesis, is the number of views each photo gets on a given day of the week. Like, maybe posts on Tuesday get way fewer views than posts on Friday, when some people slack off and scroll all day. Not me, though. I'm always on that grind like a peppercorn. But before I can dig into those speculations, I need to figure out if the day of the week has any effect whatsoever. To test that, I have to account for our old friend, variation. The number of views on all posts made on Tuesdays, for example, is itself a distribution. Some posts do really well on Tuesdays, while some do so-so. So what I'm really interested in here is whether Seasonal Susan's posts on a certain day of the week do better or worse than others on average. This sounds pretty similar to a t-test, which checks to see if two groups of data points are different from each other on average. The difference here is Seasonal Susan has 7 groups representing the different days of the week she posted on that I now have to compare against each other all at once. The way I can tell if any of the groups are really distinct from each other comes down to looking at the variance within every group compared to the variation between groups. Stick with me here. It's possible that the data for each day of the week are tightly clustered around very different values. That means that the variation within groups is small. The variation between groups, the days of the week, on the other hand, is large. Looking at this, I can see that it seems that the day of the week really does affect the views Seasonal Susan's posts get. But the data could be completely different. It might be that the variation of data for each day is big and the mean values for each group are similar. So the values of data for each day overlap so much that it's not really possible to quickly spot if there's a big difference between them. The within-group variation is large, but between the groups, it's small, which suggests that the difference in likes is more due to random variation than the day of the week. In other episodes, we've learned about the F statistic, which is a ratio of the variation between the groups and the variation within the groups. The first situation is what a large F statistic looks like, and the second is what a small F statistic looks like. The larger F is, the more the means of each group in our data look distinct from each other. So F basically helps measure how much of a noticeable difference there is between our groups given their variance. That's the same as asking if the counts of views on different days of the week really are different after accounting for the variation for any given day, and that makes it ideal as a test statistic. My hypothesis test about days of the week will build on this intuition about variance and F statistics, and that's why I chose an analysis of variance to help Seasonal Susan figure out the relationship between the algorithm and post, even if she might not deserve it. Analysis of variance, or ANOVA as pretty much everyone calls it, is a hypothesis test that compares whether the mean values between different groups, like the number of posts most views on different days of the week are really different from one another. Take my benevolent stats quest to aid seasonal Susan. The null hypothesis, or the thing I need to reject for my hunch to hold up, is that there's no significant difference between the means of each group for different days. That's like saying the views for posts for any given day look about the same. The alternative hypothesis is that there is some measurable difference between at least one day and the rest. Now, for any hypothesis test, we're looking to see whether a test statistic, in our case f, falls above some threshold in a distribution, based on whatever significance level we choose. In this case, I opt for 0.01. That's because 1% is a pretty safe rate for false positives. I don't want to be giving out bad advice to seasonal Susan because of bad stats. I might want to do it for revenge, but no. I'm a good person. The F statistic falls into the F distribution. Like other test statistic distributions, F distributions look different depending on the degrees of freedom in the data. For the F distribution, there are 2 different degrees of freedom that reflect the possible variation the data could have, given the mean values for each category. In the end, the math shakes out so that the degrees of freedom for the between group variation is the number of groups, which we usually call K, minus 1. That 1 is subtracted because the overall mean values of the groups fixes 1 degree of variation in place. The degree of freedom within each group is based on the number of data points, n, minus the number of groups, k. You can find the gory details in the description, but the upshot is that these definitions come from the way that variance is defined. Okay, back to the action and my beautiful act of heartwarming selflessness. These 2 degrees of freedom define what F distribution we're working with to test our hypothesis. Then we calculate F, the ratio of between group variability to within group variability, and see if it falls above or below the critical threshold in that distribution. And great news, the computer has your back. For me, all I have to start out with is a spreadsheet with seasonal Susan's data points arranged in the columns corresponding to her groups, the different days of the week. Google Sheets doesn't come with the ability to do an ANOVA test right out of the box, but like lots of software, there are special add-ons that do let us do that. In my case, I opt for one called the Excel Minor Analysis Tool Pack. The details on how to install and get that bad boy up and running are linked in the description. Once I pull up my data in Google Sheets, I start up this new add-on, which puts up a little menu on the right. And on the upper right-hand side is a button that says ANOVA Single Factor. That single factor just means that we're only looking at one variable. Click on this and boom, a nice little menu which handles the whole test automatically pops up. I put in the cell reference for my data range into the input box and then select a value for alpha, the threshold of significance I'm using. Then I select another empty cell for the output range where my results will be printed out. With a simple button click, the program performs a whole ANOVA analysis, automatically calculating the degrees of freedom, the F statistic, and, most helpful of all, the p-value for the test, which creeps out at 0.003. With that, I reject the null hypothesis that there's no difference in the average number of views a post gets on a given day, and I gain confidence in seasonal Susan's hunch that she really does get better engagement on some days of the week compared to others. That's great news, but there's an obvious flaw here. Although the ANOVA test tells me that there is enough evidence to suggest a difference between at least 2 days in the week, it doesn't really tell me the actual day of the week that gets the most views. So I still have to work out which group has a higher or lower average than the others. One approach is to run what's called Post-Hoc tests. For instance, I could conduct one-way t-tests between all possible pairs of days, like does Friday specifically have a higher average number of views than Tuesday, and so on. That would help me identify those days that do have more or less views on average. The risk is that by running lots of these tests, you increase the risk of bumping into a false positive. There are tricks that help get around this, either by lowering the specific value of the significance level, or by altering the p-value that pops out from the many tests by accounting for the sheer number of tests being done. These tricks are a little more complex, but if you're interested, we've left some resources for you to check out below. I do all of this work out of the goodness of my heart, but the icing on the cake is that seasonal Susan ignores it. She had a hunch from the outset that certain days, like Saturday and Sunday, were likely to have more views than a weekday, and she's determined to post on those days whether I tell her to or not. She's on her own now, but she'll likely do what's called a planned contrast, a specific investigation of variables that she knows she'll do regardless of how the ANOVA analysis turns out. Because this is planned in advance, there's less risk of moving the goalposts of the test to get a false positive, and you can check out those links in the description to learn more. No matter what way the cookie crumbles, here's the thing. Like every statistical test, ANOVA is perfectly crafted to tackle a certain kind of relationship, when numbers might depend on how they fall across different groups. This kind of test ends up being more powerful than you'd think, and we're only scratching the surface here. ANOVA can even be modified to test if two variables are related to some numerical outcome, like if Seasonal Susan was considering the influence of both the day of the week and the hour of the day when she puts her posts up. That kind of test would be a two-way ANOVA, as opposed to the one-way ANOVA we've looked at up until now. Or Seasonal Susan might want to compare the day of the week while controlling for the number of posts she's made the same day, which would be an analysis of covariance, or ANCOVA. Then there's the multivariate flavors that let you study more than one dependent variable, like if Seasonal Susan wanted to study the effects of both views and likes. These get their own adorable names of MANOVA and MANCOVA. ANOVA is really just one beautiful stepping stone towards lots of ways to perfectly optimize every single element of your photo posting until your engagement is so high that every single person on Earth does nothing except witness your glorious dinner snaps, which is basically what I help Seasonal Susan do. Now, I could do that for my own stats too, but I'm a little busy. This is for the cake. If you're enjoying this series and are interested in taking the full Study Hall Real-World Statistics course and earning college credit from ASU, check out gostudyhall.com or click on the button to learn more. And if you want to help us out, give this video a like, smash that subscribe button, and comment your favorite cooking influencer. We need to get rid of Susan. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.